I vanished after my wife cheated. Years later, she's still trying to track me down for a reconciliation. And the reason has nothing to do with love. I know that now. But when Derek called me on a Tuesday morning while I was making coffee and told me a woman had shown up at his office asking questions about where I lived, my first thought wasn't legal strategy. It was that she had finally found someone willing to do what I wouldn't. Keep looking. I'd taken one bag, one hard drive. I'd left while she was at the gym. And 4 years later, she sent a private investigator to find me. The drive is still on my desk. That drive is a blue Seagate, scratched on one corner from when I dropped it moving into my second apartment. I grabbed it the night I left because it had client contracts on it, business records, 4 years of consulting invoices I needed for tax purposes. I didn't think about what else was backed up on it until I was sitting on Derek's couch 3 days later and opened it to look for a client folder. I found a different folder entirely, one with a date for a name, a date I recognized as the week Serena told me she had been staying late at her firm's downtown office for a project that was running over budget. I want to be precise about what I found, because the details matter later, and I'm not the kind of person who exaggerates for effect. The folder contained 3 years of messages between my wife and a man named Cal. Not screenshots, the actual backed-up thread from her messaging app, synced automatically to our shared cloud account, because she had connected her phone to my laptop once, 18 months earlier, to charge it, and had forgotten to disconnect the backup. The thread started 4 months after our wedding. I remember closing the laptop. I made dinner, grilled chicken, rice, frozen broccoli. I microwaved for 4 minutes. Serena came home, said the chicken smelled good, asked about my day. I told her a client had rescheduled. She nodded and checked her phone. I said nothing for 3 days. That probably sounds strange, but I am by nature a person who requires time before I know what I actually think. Not because I'm calm, because I am genuinely slow to understand what I feel about something until I've sat with it long enough for the emotions to sort themselves into something I can work with. What I understood by the end of day 3 was this. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to confront her and listen to an explanation that rearranged the facts until they fit a version of events where her choices were partly my fault. I had watched my mother do that for years with my father, and I had promised myself, at a young enough age, that the promise felt permanent, that I would never perform grief for someone else's comfort. So I spent those 3 days doing something practical instead. I called my business bank and asked a factual question about the account structure for my incorporated consultancy. I photographed the incorporation documents in the filing cabinet in our home office. I made a second copy of the drive and gave it to Derek, told him to hold onto it without explaining why, and Derek, being Derek, said, sure, and put it in his desk drawer and didn't ask a single follow-up question, which is exactly why I've known him since we were 19. On the 4th day, Serena went to the gym. I packed one bag, laptop, clothes for a week, the drive, my passport, my external battery, the incorporation documents. I left her key on the kitchen counter. Not dramatically, I want to be clear, because I still needed to lock the door, and I used my own key, the spare, to do it. I drove to Derek's. She called on day 6. I was eating cereal at his kitchen table, and his cat was sitting on the chair across from me, judging my life choices, which felt appropriate. Where are you? Marcus said nobody knows where. Are you okay? I said, you know why I left. A pause. Then, we need to talk about this like adults. Then, you can't just disappear. Then, what about the house? That last one was interesting. Not what about us. What about the house? I'll be in touch about the property and the business, I said. Through attorneys if necessary. She said attorneys wasn't necessary. We were adults. We could figure this out. I ended the call. I moved 2 states away inside 3 weeks. My work is infrastructure consulting. I can do it from anywhere with reliable internet. And I had 3 clients who had never once needed to know my physical location. I found a sublet, then a proper lease, then a city I actually liked. I informed the clients of a new billing address. I opened a personal business account in my name alone and redirected my consulting income. The incorporated business had always been solely in my name. She wasn't listed anywhere in the filing because she had never been an investor or a partner, regardless of what she may have told people later. I did not file for divorce. I want to be honest about that. It wasn't a strategy. It was that I left in a state of functional shock that wore the costume of calm, and the divorce paperwork felt like the kind of task that required me to sit in a room with an attorney and explain my marriage to a stranger, and I kept not doing it. Months passed, then more months. I told myself I'd handle it when the dust settled, and the dust kept being not quite settled enough. And a year went by, and then another. And I was building something new, and the marriage felt very far away in a city I no longer lived in. Derek's call came 18 months after I moved. He didn't open with hello. He said, "Someone came to my office today asking about you. Woman, professional looking. Said she was trying to reconnect with an old colleague." I set down my coffee mug. "She described you pretty specifically," he said. "Asked if I knew where you were living." "What did you tell her?" "That I hadn't seen you in years, which is technically true since you refused to come visit." "Derek." "I told her nothing, David, obviously." I thanked him and ended the call. Then I stood in my kitchen for a moment, looking at the drive on my desk. Then I opened my laptop and searched marital property law for the state where Serena and I had lived, and I read for 45 minutes, and the cereal I'd poured sat getting progressively worse. The business I'd built after leaving, the consultancy I was currently running with a partner named Priya, who had joined me 8 months after I relocated, and who had her own client relationships and her own technical expertise, and without whom we wouldn't have landed our 2 largest accounts. The state where Serena and I had married and owned property recognized marital assets as anything accumulated during the legal marriage. I had founded the new consultancy while I was still, technically, legally married. I looked at the drive, the folder with a date for a name, the messages starting 4 months after our wedding. I opened my email. There was already a message from Serena. Subject line, "Marcus, please. This is important. S." I did not open it. I saved it to a folder I labeled, without much creativity, "Documentation." Then I looked at the drive for another minute. The drive was scratched on one corner. I had dropped it moving into my second apartment, which meant I'd carried it to at least 2 places before it ended up here, on this desk, in this city, next to a coffee mug that was now cold. I picked up my phone and called Priya. She answered on the second ring, which was normal. Priya operates on the assumption that unanswered calls are small emergencies, a habit I'd found mildly exhausting for approximately 1 week before I started doing the same thing. "I need to tell you something," I said. "It's going to sound complicated." "Is it a client?" "No." "Then I have time. Hold on, I'm moving away from the printer." A pause, the sound of a door. "Okay, what?" I told her about the marriage, about leaving, about the legal status I had somehow allowed to persist for 4 years, because I was conflict avoidant in ways I was still mapping. I told her about the PI and the email I hadn't opened. I told her that the consultancy we'd built together might be reachable in a marital property claim, because I had founded it during a marriage I never formally ended. Priya was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What do you actually have on paper?" "That question is why we work well together. Business incorporation in my name only, predating the new firm. Bank records showing my consulting income funded the launch. Client contracts from my prior work, establishing the relationships before we formalized anything. And her contribution to any of it? Nothing documented. She had access to our joint household account during the marriage. That's it." "Okay," Priya said. "You need a lawyer yesterday." I told her I knew. She told me to let her know if she needed to provide founding documents or client correspondence. Then she said, "For what it's worth, this is a very you problem to have. You fixed an actual disaster before I even knew there was one, but you forgot to file a single piece of paperwork." She wasn't wrong. I thanked her and hung up and opened Serena's email. The first paragraph was soft. She missed me. She thought about our early years often. She understood I needed space, and she had tried to respect that. She was sorry for the pain in our marriage, carefully not specifying whose pain or what caused it, and she genuinely wanted the chance to talk, just talk, like 2 adults who had shared a life. The second paragraph was harder. She wanted me to know she had consulted with someone about their shared assets. She didn't want things to become adversarial. She believed they could handle this privately, between themselves, without lawyers making everything worse. She thought I'd agree that was better for everyone. I forwarded it to Ellis, the attorney Derek had recommended, and typed, "She filed anything yet?" Ellis wrote back within the hour, "Not yet. Come in this week?" I went in Thursday. Ellis was the kind of lawyer who kept a very clean desk and spoke at a measured pace, which I appreciated because I am also a person who speaks at a measured pace, and I find it easier to trust people who don't perform urgency they haven't earned. He reviewed everything I'd brought: the incorporation documents, the bank records, the drive, not the full contents yet, but the business files and founding correspondence. He looked at the timeline. Then he asked about the new consultancy's founding date, and when I told him, he nodded the way people nod when something is exactly as inconvenient as they expected. She can argue the new firm is a marital asset, he said. Founded during the marriage, income generating, incorporated during the legal union. That's the claim. What are my defenses? The founding documentation helps. Pre-existing client relationships help more. The question is whether she can establish that marital resources contributed to the new venture. He paused. How much of the original joint finances went into the launch? None. I started billing clients before I even had an office. First month of the lease came from my redirected consulting income. Personal account, in my name. Good. Keep every record. He looked at me. My recommendation is that you file first, before she does. You control the framing. I asked him how long that would take to prepare. He said he'd have a petition ready within 2 weeks. I said, okay. Then I went home and sat with the drive on the desk and thought about the fact that somewhere in a city 2 states away, my wife was living in a house that still had my name on the deed, in a marriage still recognized by the state we'd been married in, and had apparently been using the spare bedroom as a short-term rental. That last part came from Nora. My sister Nora and I have a relationship that operates best when we are not discussing our feelings about it. She is 3 years younger than me, she teaches middle school science, she has strong opinions about breakfast food, and she had maintained contact with Serena after I left, because Nora believed, genuinely and without manipulation, that my silence was causing damage to people who didn't deserve it. I understood her position. I didn't share it, but I understood it. She called me 6 weeks after Derek's PI story, which meant she had probably been thinking about calling for 5 of those weeks. She opened with, "I'm not calling on anyone's behalf. I'm calling because I think you should know some things." Okay. Serena told people you had some kind of episode, that you disappeared because you were struggling with something, and she's been worried. I let that land for a second. What do people think happened? That maybe you had a breakdown, that she's been waiting for you to reach out. A pause. She mentioned she hired someone to find you. She said it was because she was concerned about your well-being. I said, she had a 3-year affair. I have the messages. That's why I left. Nora was quiet for long enough that I checked my phone to see if the call had dropped. Then she said, "Are you okay?" "I have coffee and a business," I said, which is more than I had before. She didn't laugh, but she made the sound she makes when she's processing something by organizing it into categories. I could practically hear her sorting. After a moment, she said, "She's been renting out the second bedroom, on one of those platforms. Has been for about a year." I wrote that down. Not dramatically, I was sitting at my desk. I had a notepad beside the laptop. I wrote, "Property rental income, check dates." Nora didn't know why I was writing it down. She probably assumed I was noting it for personal reasons. "She asked me once if I knew where you were living," Nora added. I told her I didn't, which is true. I thanked her. I asked about her students. She said one of them had accidentally grown a mold culture that genuinely alarmed the school principal, and she was privately very proud of the kid. I told her that sounded right for her classroom. After we hung up, I sent Ellis the rental information. The Janet lunch happened 2 weeks later, and I should have known better. Janet is Serena's mother. She is a warm woman who makes very good soup and who had, during my marriage, treated me with the kind of steady, uncomplicated affection that I found quietly sustaining. She was not part of whatever plan her daughter was running. I was almost certain of that, which is why, when she reached Nora and asked to meet me just to talk, not on anyone's behalf, just to see how I was doing, I said yes. We met at a restaurant midway between my city and Nora's. Janet looked older. She hugged me for a long moment and told me I looked thin, which I wasn't, and asked if I was eating properly, which I was. And then we ordered food and she told me Serena wasn't the same, that she cried often, that she wanted the chance to explain and apologize. I asked, "Has she told you why I left?" Janet said Serena had told her the marriage had problems, that they had both pulled away from each other, that it was complicated. I understood right then how this worked. I was the complicated one. The disappearance was the story. The 3-year affair that preceded it existed in a version of events Janet had never been given. I didn't tell her. She was not the problem, and it would have hurt her, and she deserved to have her feelings about her daughter be her own to revise in her own time. I paid for lunch. I hugged her again on the sidewalk. I said, "Tell Serena to have her attorney contact mine." Janet's face went very still. "I didn't know there was an attorney," she said. "There is," I said. "I'm sorry, Janet." I drove home and called Ellis and told him to move faster on the petition. He called me back the following Thursday instead. Priya called first. "Someone came to the office," she said. Her voice was carefully neutral in the way it gets when she's managing her own reaction. "Man, asked for you by name, left a card." I knew what it was before she told me. "Process server," I said. "Process server," she confirmed. Serena had filed first. I sat in the parking garage across from our office building for about 20 minutes. The filing alleged that I had abandoned the marital home without legal cause. It listed a claim against the original incorporated business as a marital asset. It listed a claim against the new consultancy, founded during the legal marriage, as community property. It listed the house with her as primary occupant and cited her contributions to mortgage maintenance. She had made 0 payments, but she had been living there, which apparently counted for something in her attorney's framing. The word abandoned appeared 4 times in the first 2 pages. I counted. I looked at the drive sitting in my bag. I had started carrying it with me again, after Derek's call, the same way you carry an umbrella once you've been caught in rain badly enough. I put it on the passenger seat. Then I called Ellis and told him we needed to move up our meeting. Ellis's office had a window that looked out onto a parking structure, which meant it had no view worth looking at, which meant I looked at the documents instead. I had brought everything: the drive, a printed summary of its contents, the bank records organized by date, the incorporation filings, the founding client contracts, and the notepad page where I had written property rental income, check dates in handwriting that looked calmer than I had felt when I wrote it. Ellis reviewed the drive contents methodically. He had a yellow legal pad, and he made notes without commenting until he reached the message thread. Then he stopped and read for several minutes. "This exchange here," he said, turning the printed summary toward me and pointing at a date. 2 years before you left. I knew the one. Serena and Cal discussing what the future might look like. Cal asking what she would do about the business if things with Marcus got formal. Serena responding that she wanted to make sure the business situation was clear before anything else moved forward. "She was thinking about the asset claim before you discovered the affair," Ellis said, "before there was a divorce to have." I know. That doesn't change the no-fault analysis. The state doesn't care about the affair as grounds. He set the page down. But it establishes that this filing isn't a response to your departure. It's a plan she had before you left. That matters for how we characterize her claim, whether this is a good faith division of assets or a financially motivated action she was preparing while the marriage was still intact. I nodded. It also, Ellis said, means she walked into mediation against a man who has had this document for 4 years and never used it. That's an interesting position for her attorney to be in. We filed our response the following week: counter petition, full documentation package, and a formal request that the property accounting include income generated from the spare bedroom rental during my absence. Nora had found the listing for me. She hadn't been looking for it, she said. It had appeared in a search she was doing for something unrelated, which I believed completely, because that is exactly the kind of thing that happens to Nora. The listing had reviews. It had been active for 14 months. I had not consented to the rental, had not received any portion of the income, and my name was on the deed. Ellis also sent a separate letter to Serena's attorney regarding the private investigator's conduct. During the course of the investigation, the PI firm had contacted one of my clients under the pretense of a professional reference check and had asked questions about my personal life, my living situation, and whether I had a domestic partner. This was documentable through the client, who had called me afterward, mildly confused, and whom I had asked to write down what was said and send it to me in an email. He had done so immediately because he was a careful person who kept records, which is partly why he was my client. The The letter noted that this conduct represented potential business interference and that we were reserving the right to pursue additional claims depending on how the divorce proceedings resolved. Serena's attorney requested a 2-week extension before mediation. Ellis granted it without comment. The mediation was held in a conference room in a building downtown that smelled like recycled air and institutional carpet, neutral territory, which meant it belonged equally to no one and felt like it. I arrived 11 minutes early because I am a person who arrives early to things I dread, the same way I front-load difficult emails. Priya had offered to come and wait in the lobby. I had told her that wasn't necessary. She had said she was aware it wasn't necessary, and she was going to do it anyway because she had a proposal to work on, and the coffee downstairs was good. She was sitting in a chair near the entrance when I walked through the door, laptop open, a cup of coffee beside her that she had clearly already started on. "You look fine," she said without looking up. "I'm not particularly worried," I said, which was partially true. "I know," she said. "That's what worries me about you." I took the elevator up. Serena was already in the conference room when Ellis and I entered. I hadn't seen her in 4 years. She was dressed carefully, professionally, and she had the expression of someone who had prepared for multiple versions of this conversation. When our eyes met, she produced something that was close to a warm smile, the kind she used to use when we ran into people she wanted to impress. I looked at the table, long, rectangular water glasses. Her attorney was a woman named Barfield, who had organized papers into neat stacks in a way that was meant to communicate competence, which probably worked on people who hadn't spent 15 years organizing their own documents for clients. Barfield opened. Marcus had abandoned the marital home without legal cause or communication, leaving his wife solely responsible for maintaining the property. He had founded a business during the legal marriage without disclosure to his spouse. The original incorporated business had operated as a marital enterprise, and Serena had contributed substantially to its success through client relationship management and operational support. They were seeking equitable division of both entities. Ellis responded. He presented the incorporation filing date and the bank records showing my income as the sole funding source for both businesses. He noted that Serena's access to the joint household account during the marriage was indistinguishable from ordinary marital living expenses, and that no documented investment agreement, signed partnership arrangement, or equity agreement of any kind existed. Barfield pivoted. The original business had operated during the marriage. Community property principles applied regardless of whose name appeared on the filing. Ellis presented 2 years of tax returns, showing the business's minimal profitability during the marriage and its substantially increased revenue after I left, driven by client relationships and technical work I performed independently. Then he introduced the message exchange. He did not make a speech about it. He placed printed copies in front of Barfield and Serena, stated the date, and summarized its content. 2 years before the marriage ended, Serena had discussed wanting to ensure the business situation was clear before things moved forward, in the context of a conversation about the affair partner and what a future outside the marriage might look like. Barfield said it was irrelevant in a no-fault state. Ellis agreed it was irrelevant to grounds. He said it was relevant to characterizing the nature of the filing, whether the claim represented a good faith request for equitable division or a financially motivated action that had been in preparation before the divorce existed. Serena straightened something on the table in front of her. A pen, I think. She picked it up, set it down 2 inches to the left, and didn't look at it again. Then Ellis presented the property counterclaim. I was not contesting her right to equity in the property. I was requesting an accounting of the rental income she had generated from the spare bedroom during my absence, income produced from an asset in which I held equal legal ownership without my knowledge or consent. He produced the listing, the review history, and the 14-month duration. Barfield asked for a recess. I went into the corridor. Nora was there, sitting in one of the chairs along the wall with a paper cup of coffee she'd gotten from somewhere. She'd asked to come, and I had let her because she had earned it, and because I thought I might need someone to sit next to who wasn't my attorney. She asked if I was okay. I told her I didn't know yet, which was true. "You don't look happy," she said. "I'm not unhappy," I said. "I just want it to be finished." She nodded. She didn't tell me it was almost over, or that I was doing great, or any of the other things people say when they don't know what else to offer. She just drank her coffee, and I stood there and we were quiet for a few minutes, which was exactly right. When we reconvened, Ellis raised the PI firm's client contact. He presented my client's written account, dated and detailed, describing the call and the questions asked. He noted we were reserving the right to pursue a business interference claim. He said this was separate from the divorce itself and would proceed on its own timeline. Barfield said they would need to review that. Ellis said, of course. Then Serena spoke. Her attorney had been wrapping up a point about equitable consideration, and Serena put her hand flat on the table and said she wanted to say something directly. I looked at her. I made mistakes, she said. I know that. I've never pretended otherwise. But you disappeared. You left without a word and you were gone for 4 years. And I never got the chance to. You had 4 years to contact Ellis, I said. Instead, you sent a private investigator to ask my clients about my personal life. That was because I was trying to find you. I was worried. Your attorney can talk to mine. I said it the same way I would have said it about a billing dispute or a contract revision. Evenly. She stopped speaking. I looked at the table. I want to be honest about that moment. It did not feel like victory. It felt like the last time I would ever have to translate myself into a language she was willing to hear. And even then she wasn't going to hear it, and I was done trying. That was what it felt like stopping something that had been running for a very long time. The settlement took another 3 weeks to finalize. The property would be sold, proceeds would be split, but the accounting included the 14 months of rental income she had collected, which reduced her net share substantially, not as punishment, but as arithmetic. The original business claim was dismissed. No documented investment, no equity agreement, no good faith basis for the claim in light of the premeditation evidence. The new consultancy was determined to be a separate asset built on pre-existing client relationships and post-separation income. Her claim against it was dismissed. The professional conduct complaint against the PI firm remained open. Nora drove me home after the final paperwork day because I had asked her to, which was unusual enough that she didn't say anything about it. We stopped at a light 3 blocks from my apartment and she said, "I'm sorry I didn't know sooner about what she did." "You're not the one who should apologize," I said. "I know, I'm apologizing anyway." The light changed. I watched the intersection clear. "She really did love you," Nora said. "I think, in her way." "I know," I said. "That part's not the problem." I sent Janet a note 2 days later. Short, no details, no blame. I told her I hoped she was well and that I was sorry for how complicated everything had become. I meant both of those things. She wrote back one line, "Take care of yourself, David." I saved it in a folder that was not the documentation folder. I did not call Serena. I did not post about the outcome. I did not tell my clients anything beyond that a personal matter had been resolved. Ellis confirmed the divorce was finalized on a Wednesday afternoon. I was in the middle of a client call when his email came in. I saw the subject line, finished the call, closed the laptop, and sat for a moment. Then I opened the drawer and put the finalization document inside it. The drive is still on my desk. I've thought about backing it up properly and clearing the desk. The way you think about reorganizing a closet. Eventually, when I have time, when it seems worth the effort. I still have the photograph too. It's in a box in the bedroom closet, not on display, not destroyed, just present the way things are present when you haven't decided what they mean yet. I'm not sure I need to decide. That's something I've been slow to understand, that you can carry something without it being a wound, without it directing anything. The morning after the finalization, I made coffee. Opened the client proposal that had been sitting half-finished for 2 weeks. The drive was on the desk, scratch corner facing up, next to the mug. Ordinary. Just an object. I started typing.